Welcome back. Today we're exploring the day the Allies discovered a crime so dark Eisenhower feared the world would eventually refuse to believe it. He made a haunting decision on the spot that changed history forever. Stay tuned to find out what it was. Help us preserve the truth by subscribing and liking this video. Your support is vital. Let's head to the front lines. April 12, 1945, 11:30 a.m., Ohrdruf, Germany. The air is thick, not with the acrid gunpowder of the front lines, but with something far more cloying. It is the scent of lye, of scorched earth, and of rot. You can almost feel the heavy, damp cold of the German spring clinging to your uniform as you walk behind the three most powerful men in the European theater, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, General George S. Patton, and General Omar Bradley. Usually these men are surrounded by the hum of jeeps, the barking of orders, and the distant thunder of artillery. Today, there is only a terrifying heavy silence. Just a few days earlier, the 4th Armored Division had stumbled upon this place. It wasn't a major administrative center like Berlin or a strategic port like Hamburg. It was a subcamp of Buchenwald called Ohrdruf. The soldiers who first entered were combat-hardened veterans. They had seen men blown apart by 80mm shells. They had seen the screams of the dying in the hedgerows of Normandy. But as they entered the gates of Ohrdruf, they stopped. Some of them wept. Others simply turned away and vomited. Now, Eisenhower is here to see it for himself. As the generals walk toward the center of the camp, they pass a shed. Inside, the bodies are stacked like cordwood. These are not soldiers killed in the heat of battle. These are living skeletons, men whose skin is stretched so tightly over their ribs that they look like anatomical drawings come to life. They have been covered in lime to hide the stench of their decay, but the white powder only serves to make the scene more ghostly, more otherworldly. General Patton, a man known for his blood and guts bravado, a man who had led thousands into the jaws of death without flinching, stops. His face, usually a mask of stern military discipline, suddenly pales. He turns his head, stumbles behind a nearby barracks, and is physically ill. Eisenhower, however, does not look away. His jaw is set so tightly it looks as if it might crack. His eyes, usually sharp with the calculation of a master strategist, are wide with a mixture of horror and a growing incandescent rage. He walks into every shed. He examines every pyre where the SS had attempted to burn the evidence of their atrocities on makeshift grills made of railway tracks. He stares at the emaciated survivors who are too weak to even stand, their eyes sunken and hollow, staring back at the man who has come to liberate a graveyard. You can see the gears turning in Eisenhower's mind. This isn't just a military failure of the Third Reich. This is something else. This is a deliberate, industrialized erasure of human life. As he stands over a pit of partially buried corpses, a young American soldier nearby remarks that he can't believe what he's seeing. Eisenhower turns to him, his voice low and vibrating with a cold, hard clarity. "We are told that the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for," Eisenhower says, gesturing to the piles of human remains. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against. But Eisenhower's realization goes deeper than the immediate horror. He looks at the surrounding hills, at the neat German villages just a few miles away, where smoke rises peacefully from chimneys. He knows the human mind. He knows that once the war is over, once the headlines fade and the world tries to move on, people will want to forget this. They will call it propaganda. They will say it was exaggerated. He realizes that the truth is as fragile as the skeletons lying at his feet. He turns to General Bradley and his staff, his eyes burning with a new mission. He isn't thinking about the next bridgehead or the fall of Berlin anymore. He is thinking about 1,000 years from now. He is thinking about the deniers, the skeptics, and the shroud of time. With a sharp, decisive motion, he summons his aides. He is about to issue an order that will force the world to look at the sun without blinking, an order that will change the way history is recorded forever. Section 2. the command to witness. The command was simple, yet it was unprecedented in the annals of warfare. Eisenhower didn't just want a report filed. He didn't want a sanitized memo sent to the War Department. He turned to his aides and issued an order that rippled through the ranks of the Third Army. I want every American unit not actually in the front lines to pass through this camp. He wanted them to see the filth. He wanted them to smell the rot. He understood that for the average GI, the war had been a series of muddy foxholes and anonymous artillery exchanges. Now he was forcing them to look into the very eyes of the evil they had been sent to destroy. He knew that if they saw it with their own eyes, they would become the living vessels of a truth that no one could ever erase. But he didn't stop with the soldiers. Eisenhower reached for his cable manifests and sent an urgent, blistering message to Washington and London. He demanded that journalists, photographers, and, most importantly, members of Congress be flown across the Atlantic immediately. I made the visit deliberately, he wrote, in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things, if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to charge these allegations merely to propaganda. He was weaponizing the camera. He ordered his signal corps to film everything. He wanted the piles of clothes, the canisters of gas, the gold teeth pried from the mouths of the dead, and the scratch marks on the walls of the gas chambers documented with cold, clinical precision. He was building a mountain of evidence that would crush any future attempt at denial. Then he turned his gaze toward the nearby town. Less than 2 miles from the barbed wire of Ohrdruf sat the town of the same name. It was a picturesque German village, seemingly untouched by the depravity just over the hill. When questioned, the townspeople offered a chorus of "Wir haben es nicht gewusst." We didn't know. They claimed they had no idea what was happening behind those fences, despite the trains that rattled through the night and the smell of burning flesh that drifted on the wind. Eisenhower's response was a masterclass in psychological accountability. He didn't lecture them. He didn't scream. Instead, he ordered the local mayor and his wife to be brought to the camp for a personal tour. You can imagine the scene, the mayor, dressed in his finest Sunday suit, walking through the mud and the blood. Beside him, American soldiers stood with fixed bayonets, their faces hardened into masks of contempt. Eisenhower ensured they were shown every shed, every pit, and every bone. He wanted the ordinary citizens to see what their silence had bought. The tour had a devastating effect. That night, after returning to his home, the mayor of Ohrdruf and his wife, unable to live with the weight of what they had witnessed, took their own lives. Eisenhower's resolve only hardened. He realized that Ohrdruf was merely the tip of a much larger, much darker iceberg. As his armies pushed deeper into the heart of the Reich, they began to uncover more: Buchenwald, Dachau, Mauthausen. Each discovery was worse than the last. And at each gate, Eisenhower's orders remained the same: document everything, show the world, do not let them look away. But as the evidence mounted, a new problem arose. The soldiers were beginning to take justice into their own hands. The line between liberator and executioner was beginning to blur as the GIs looked at the SS guards and saw not men, but monsters. Eisenhower knew he had to maintain order, but even he found it difficult to find mercy in a place where God seemed to have been absent for years. Section 3. The Burden of Proof. The discovery at Ohrdruf was not an isolated nightmare. It was the opening of a floodgate. As the Allied machinery ground deeper into the dying Reich, the reports began to scream across the radio wires with sickening frequency. Buchenwald, Nordhausen, Dachau. Each name carried the same stench, the same skeletal survivors, the same piles of ash. For the American GIs, the war had fundamentally shifted. The men of the 42nd and 45th Infantry Divisions, who would soon liberate Dachau, were no longer just fighting to seize a hill or secure a crossroads. They were walking into the aftermath of a massacre that had been running for years. When they saw the death train at the gates of Dachau, 40 railway cars filled with emaciated corpses, the thin veneer of military discipline shattered. Eisenhower received reports of unauthorized executions of SS guards. He knew that under international law, prisoners were to be protected, but as he looked at the photographic evidence piling up on his desk, his moral compass struggled with the weight of what his men were seeing. How do you tell a 19-year-old from Iowa to show mercy to a man who has spent his afternoon overseeing a gas chamber? To channel this mounting rage into something constructive, Eisenhower doubled down on his policy of forced confrontation. In the town of Weimar, near the Buchenwald camp, he didn't just invite the officials, he ordered the military police to round up 1,000 civilians. These were the respectable citizens, doctors, shopkeepers, and teachers. You can see them in the grainy archival footage, men in fedoras and women in fur-trimmed coats, walking jauntily toward the camp gates as if going to a picnic. They are smiling, chatting, convinced this is just more Allied theater. Then the camera catches the exact moment they pass the crematorium. The smiles vanish. The women collapse. The men cover their faces with handkerchiefs, not just against the smell, but against the reality that their civilization had been built upon a foundation of bones. Eisenhower's order was uncompromising. They will see it. They will touch it. They will bury them. Under the watchful eyes of American soldiers with leveled rifles, the innocent Germans were forced to dig individual graves, giving the victims a dignity in death that they had been denied in life. But while Eisenhower was forcing the Germans to look, he was also looking at the future of the American soul. He knew the great silence would eventually fall. He knew that the boys coming home would want to bury these memories under the suburban lawns of the 1950s. To prevent this, he made a decision that would change the course of history. He didn't just want the politicians to see the camps. He wanted the most influential minds of the media to witness the abyss. He summoned a group of 18 high-ranking American newspaper editors and publishers, including Joseph Pulitzer, to tour the charnel houses. As Pulitzer stood in the barracks of Buchenwald, his eyes welling with tears, he realized that Eisenhower was right. No words could describe this. Only the cold, unblinking eye of the camera could hold the truth. Eisenhower told them, "I want you to tell the American people exactly what you saw. Don't leave anything out, because if you don't, no one will believe it happened." Yet, even as the world began to grasp the scale of the Holocaust, a new horror was emerging from the shadows. The Nazis weren't just killing people, they were systematically looting the continent. And in a salt mine in Merkers, Eisenhower would soon find the ultimate proof that the Holocaust was not just a crime of ideology, it was a crime of profit. Section 4. The Ledger of Blood and the Final Verdict, April 15, 1945. 2,000 feet below the earth. Merkers, Germany. The air in the salt mine is dry and tastes of ancient earth. You can hear the rhythmic, metallic clatter of a rickety industrial elevator descending into the darkness. Inside the cramped cage stand Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley. They are no longer in the mud of Ohrdruf, but the horror has followed them underground. As the elevator doors creak open, the beams of their flashlights hit a sight that seems pulled from a fever dream. Room after room is filled with gold, not just bars of bullion, but a sea of silver, rare paintings, and crates of currency from every occupied nation in Europe. Patton, never one for subtlety, jokes about the wealth, but the humor dies the moment they reach the SS treasure room. It isn't the gold bars that stop Eisenhower's heart. It is the suitcases, thousands of them. Some are filled with wedding rings, tens of thousands of thin gold bands, stripped from the fingers of people who were told they were going to the showers. Others are filled with gold teeth and fillings, brutally extracted from corpses. In that moment, the economic reality of the Holocaust hits the Supreme Commander. This wasn't just a frenzy of hate. It was a state-sponsored, industrialized liquidation of a people for the sake of the Reich's treasury. Eisenhower stares at a pile of discarded children's shoes. He realizes that the Nazi machine had a line item for everything. Even the hair of the murdered was sold to make felt. The meticulous record-keeping of the Nazis, which they had used to manage their genocide, would now become the rope that hung them. "I want every bit of this recorded," Eisenhower repeats, his voice echoing in the salt cavern, every ring, every tooth. His obsession with documentation would soon find its ultimate purpose in the Nuremberg trials. Because Eisenhower had forced the press to witness the camps, because he had ordered his generals to photograph the pits, and because he had made the German civilians bury the dead, the defense of "we didn't know" or "it never happened" was strangled in its crib. When the Nazi high command sat in the dock at Nuremberg, they were confronted not just with testimony, but with the very films Eisenhower had ordered to be made. The flickering lights of the projector showed the world what Eisenhower had seen at Ohrdruf. The footage was so undeniable, so visceral, that even the most hardened defendants turned their eyes away from the screen. Eisenhower had won the war on the battlefield, but his greatest victory was won for history. He knew that the passage of time is the greatest ally of the liar. He knew that as the witnesses died off, the shadows would try to reclaim the truth. Today, when you see a photograph of the liberation, when you watch the grainy footage of the survivors, or when you walk through the silent halls of a Holocaust museum, you are seeing the result of a single man's refusal to look away. Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't just liberate the camps, he ensured that the world would never be allowed to forget they existed. He understood that the ultimate weapon against such evil isn't a bomb or a bullet. It is the uncomfortable, unyielding, and eternal light of the truth.